not renowned, very much a failure in the baseball.
But baseball is a sport built on the ability to overcome failure.
That is true. That's true.
And the Dodgers ratings in this town are enormous because and I say we, this city has lived through seeing Kershaw unravel, and they love Kershaw.
I don't disagree with that. I think that's why your ratings are so big. The fans have lived through your failures year after year after year, and it's like you're like family to them.
I was going to be.
You're like drunk uncle getting D's on his report card. I absolutely love it.
By the way, I just didn't really think much about this all weekend, but your near upset of the week was Pitt over Notre Dame.
You were leading off with that. Listen, I'm on the bench. Yes, I'm on the bench. I will not give you thank you.
Okay, so let's.
For that. That was rough. And by the way, Pitt did exactly what I said they were going to do, which was play great run defense, and it didn't work at all.
So let's just address that first. Notre Dame.
Yeah.
The week before they had struggled against Louisville, but Tony Dungy brought something on the broadcast. He said, "Listen, they wanted to work on their passing game. It was windier than they thought.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of the game against Louisville, Notre Dame had to go, okay,
backtrack.
We can't do it." And I thought Dungy brought up a great point. I think Notre Dame, to me, is probably the fourth or fifth best team in the country.
I have them number 4 right now, just ahead of Georgia because Georgia lost that game to Alabama. I still think that they're kind of behind just from a talent perspective, those teams at the top. And we get that. I do think when I watch them now, and I went back and I watched that game on game tape, Pitt was really struggling personnel-wise. They got their quarterback was out, so on and so forth. Now, having said that, Notre Dame is really big. At key spots. They've got a safety that's enormous. Their tight ends are big. Like, they've got big bodies that allow them to do really cool stuff offensively. I think the limiting factor right now is probably Ian Book. If you just have to have him sit there and drop back and throw the football, which they're going to have to do at some point. You know, they got Clemson next week. Not this week, but next week.
Yeah.
Is he going to be able to do that? And I think the questions remain for Notre Dame on that. But this is a really good team.
Yep.
A really good team.
And
Top 5 in the country, certainly.
Yeah, and I actually think they match up okay with Clemson, parts of them. To your point, I do think Notre Dame can lean on you a little bit.
Sure.
And Clemson hasn't faced that kind of physical team this year. They lean on you. Notre Dame can win ugly. They won't beat Clemson, but you can ugly up games, and I think Notre Dame is built to do that against Clemson.
There is an element to Clemson, though, that they're so veteran, they're so good. I think they're bored. Right? I think they're bored out of their mind, just waiting, like Gerard Butler in 300, you know, and like they're just like licking their chops for an opponent that can actually test them, you know, and they thought they were going to get that in Miami, and they walked out there and just bam, just crushed Miami. Something tells me that we're in for a game like that against Notre Dame. Like Clemson is just like they can't wait to be tested finally, and I think Clemson might roll Notre Dame, but that's a week from
okay.
now.
You, Gus, Jenny Taft, Michigan State at Michigan. So now you and I, if I recall, are both on the hard. See, I've always had this theory about Michigan football. It's not Ohio State. It's not Alabama.
It's not. No, historically, it's not.
There's like 5 programs in the country. And I think actually USC used to be one. They're not anymore. They're not as committed as I thought they were. It is Oklahoma. It is Alabama. It is Ohio State. Boy, it gets real thin after that. They're totally committed to football. And then there's about 8 teams, of which Michigan falls in historically. They're really good. But Ohio State is more committed. They'll fire coaches more quickly. Brady Hoke wouldn't have lasted a 4-game losing streak.
No.
And I think Harbaugh, given that, they're a 9.5-win program to a 10-win program, and he's right on track, and I think he's done a very good job.
I'll go a step further. He has done a good job. And listen, you know, he's going to draw the lion's share of the criticism because there was so much focus on Jim and the antics and the pants and, you know, although he changed to blue, which is interesting, right? So he's changed things up. Here's one thing to really understand about Jim Harbaugh. He's just now adjusting, and this adjustment has been a little bit late, although if it comes to fruition, watch out. Because in college football, you can't win at the top end unless you can score 35 points against a really good team. Okay, you just can't.
That's the sport now.
That's the sport now, right? And Bama has had to adjust, and we've talked about it, right? Nick Saban has had to adjust offensively, 35, 40 points in big games. Ryan Day goes to Ohio State. Guess what you have to do against Ohio State now? You can't beat them with Don Brown's defense. You can't just out-defense them and tough them and win the game. They came close a few years ago, remember, and they had that overtime game, but then what happened? Ryan Day steps foot in Columbus, Ohio, and guess what happens to that offense? Goes through the roof. Now what do you have to do to beat Ohio State? If you're Michigan, score. You've got to be able to score, and they haven't been able to even come close to the offensive efficiency. And what I saw last week from Michigan was the corner being turned offensively. Joe Milton, their quarterback, is an incredibly talented guy. He's huge, first of all. He's got a quick release, one of the strongest arms that I've seen in college football in the last 4 or 5 years, stronger than Josh Allen or even Herbert. I mean, throws absolute lasers. He can run it pretty well. And here's the other part. They haven't gone pure spread like they tried to do last year with Shea Patterson and just run those like soft zone schemes in the run game. You know what they did in the run game? Right. They went back to what Harbaugh does well, which was pull guards, pull tackles, run power-oriented schemes, and it all has to stem from number 42, Ben Mason. You're saying like, well, Joel, why are you bringing up Ben Mason? Let me tell you why. Because Ben Mason was a guy who was a fullback under the old offense. Last year, Gaddis comes in to be a spread coordinator, so he's got to go to defensive tackle. So he played defensive tackle last year. And this year, they're like, you know what? Let's, out of the shotgun, go back and be a more power-oriented run game. So Ben Mason's now back on offense. They're lining him up all over the place. He had several key blocks on the big runs, and they're back to getting that downhill. So now all of a sudden you've got the power-oriented running game, a quarterback that can throw it, and still a defense that I think can be efficient and certainly rush the quarterback. This may be Jim Harbaugh's best Michigan team. All right. I'm not saying they'll beat Ohio State. I'm just saying, like, I'm bullish on Michigan after watching them last week.
All right. So I'm going to throw a theory at you.
Oh, boy.
So I was listening to, he's a very smart guy. He's on that show, The Prophet, Marcus Lemonis.
Yeah.
Very smart guy.
Yeah, love that show.
Camping World, very smart show. And he was talking to CNBC, one of their financial guys. And he was talking about how he is watching people change in America. They want nature more because of COVID. And COVID, some of this stuff is going to change how we act in America. This is not a temporary thing. Much of this will stay. And even if vaccines come out, he said, we are seeing over the last, with all the stress in society.
The ability to work remotely and virtually.
Okay. And this is my point. If COVID is going to be here for a couple of years, the NBA, hockey, baseball, and the NFL have shown an ability because of billionaire owners to handle it. I mean, God, until last night, we didn't have a baseball player have COVID for months.
Right.
NBA never had one. NHL didn't have one. But on a college level, it's different. You do not, even at Ohio State, you do not have $7 million a year for COVID. What am I getting to? If Marcus Lemonis is right, and many of the business leaders in America say, get used to it, this is going to be around until 2023, 2024, at some level. It makes college sports less attractive. Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley. Do you want to go through this a year? Do you want to? I was watching it this weekend, and I said, you know, it's weird how a world changes, and all of a sudden, I'm going to be at this job forever, and then you wake up one morning and go, you know, this is not really the world I want. COVID is so difficult for even big financial institutions that Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day say, I go to the NFL.
I could see that.
I think the Ohio State and Oklahoma could have their coaches cherry-picked in the next 3 months.
I will tell you this. For guys that got into this profession because they love the sport, they love to develop players, they love the locker room, they love the team aspect, football, they love football. Every coach that I talk to now throughout the country has told me that they're spending maybe 10% of their time on football. Now, that's not to say that's bad, but COVID is taking a huge chunk of their time. Then they're also worried about the mental health of their players, the social justice aspect of what's going on.
They're 18 years old
in our country with their players, and the coaches are saying, like, listen, it's just different, right? It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. So if you did get into this based on the expectation that you wanted to be a football coach and develop football players and build football character, college is different now. Now, I'm not suggesting that these guys will or should leave. I am agreeing that it is different, and there is going to be a dynamic shift in how college coaches are going to have to handle their organizations versus what a head football coach in the National Football League would have to change. Now, you bring those two guys up. Here's why I think that that's so interesting. If you're the New York Jets and you're trying to woo Trevor Lawrence out of college football, like, come on, let's go. Like, don't stick around in college, right? Don't flex your muscle in terms of your leverage. Come to the Jets. Wouldn't one of those guys be attractive?
Thank you.
I think
Trevor Lawrence said yesterday, I'm not sure if I'm going to go to the NFL. It's